Danny Carter had never wanted to be special. He was 28 years old, average height, average build, with brown hair that never stayed in place, no matter how much he tried to fix it. He worked as a maintenance technician at the United Nations Space Embassy in Geneva, and he was perfectly happy with that. His job was simple. He fixed things: air filters, broken doors, leaking pipes, faulty electrical panels. He carried his tools in a worn leather belt around his waist and spent most of his days in crawl spaces and maintenance tunnels where nobody could see him. That was exactly how he liked it. Danny was not a diplomat. He was not a soldier or a scientist. He did not give speeches or shake hands with important people. He stayed in the background, did his work, and went home to his small apartment, where he watched old movies and ate microwave dinners alone. But everything changed on the day the Valorans came to Earth. The Galactic Council had been watching humanity for nearly 50 years before they decided to make contact. Earth was young. They said humans were primitive compared to the hundreds of species that filled the galaxy, but they had potential, and so the Council had opened diplomatic relations with Earth. Just 3 years ago. Since then, many alien species had visited the embassy. Danny had seen creatures with scales, creatures with feathers, creatures with more eyes than he could count. He had learned to keep his head down and his mouth shut around them. They were important guests, and he was just the guy who made sure the toilets worked. Everyone said so. The Valoran Empire was one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. They had conquered star systems, built impossible machines, and developed psychic abilities that let them move objects with their minds and read the thoughts of lesser beings. They were beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. When the Valorian royal family announced they would visit Earth as a sign of goodwill, the entire embassy went into a panic. Every floor was cleaned until it sparkled. Every system was checked and double-checked. Security was tripled. Danny worked 18-hour shifts for 2 weeks straight just to make sure nothing would break during their visit. On the day of their arrival, Danny watched from a maintenance balcony high above the main hall. He was supposed to be monitoring the climate control systems, but he could not help staring at the scene below. The Valorans were magnificent. They stood nearly 8 feet tall with long limbs and graceful movements that made them look like they were dancing. Even when they were standing still, their skin was silver and seemed to glow softly from within, like moonlight made solid. Their eyes were large and violet, and their hair flowed like liquid metal down their backs. The Emperor came first. He was enormous, easily the largest being Danny had ever seen. His glow was so bright it hurt to look at him directly. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged in his entire life. Behind him came his children. 6 of them walked in perfect formation, each one as tall and radiant as their father. The princes wore armor made of some material that shifted colors as they moved. The princesses wore gowns that seemed to be woven from starlight itself. They held their heads high and looked at the assembled humans with expressions of polite boredom. And then Danny saw her. She was at the very back, almost hidden behind her siblings. She was so much smaller than the others that Danny almost missed her entirely. Where they towered, she barely reached 5 and 1/2 ft. Where they glowed like suns, her light was dim and flickering where they walked with confidence. She moved like she was trying to make herself invisible. Princess Lyra. Dany had read about her in the briefing documents, the youngest child of the Emperor, the weakest Valoran ever recorded in the royal bloodline. The galactic press called her names that made Dany and LT Unk and GT Y's stomach turned. They called her the runt, they mistake the embarrassment. He watched as she followed her family into the main hall. Her violet eyes darted around nervously, and her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. When a camera drone flew too close to her face, she flinched so hard she nearly tripped over her own gown. None of her family members noticed, or if they did not care. Dany felt something twist in his chest. He knew what it was like to be invisible. He knew what it was like to be overlooked and forgotten, but at least he had chosen that life. This girl had been born into a family of giants, and she would never be able to hide from the comparisons. The welcome ceremony began below. Speeches were given, hands were shaken, gifts were exchanged. Dany watched for a while, but eventually he had to get back to work. A sensor in the East Wing was acting up, and he needed to fix it before it caused any problems. He climbed down from the balcony and made his way through the service corridors. The sounds of the ceremony faded behind him until all he could hear was the hum of machinery and the echo of his own footsteps. He found the faulty sensor and got to work. It was a simple fix, just a loose wire that needed to be reconnected. He had just finished when he heard something strange. It sounded like crying. Dany paused and listened. The sound was coming from around the corner, soft and muffled, like someone was trying very hard not to be heard. He hesitated. It was not his business. He should just finish his work and leave. But the crying continued, and Dany could not bring himself to walk away. He put his tools back in his belt and slowly walked toward the sound. He turned the corner and stopped. Princess Lyra was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, and her face was buried in her arms. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and her dim glow flickered like a candle in the wind. She had not noticed him yet. Dany stood there for a long moment, unsure of what to do. Every rule he had ever learned told him to leave immediately. She was royalty. He was nobody. If anyone saw him here with her, he could lose his job or worse. But she looked so small and so alone, and Dany had never been very good at following rules when someone needed help. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Hey," he said softly, "are you okay?" Princess Lyra's head snapped up, and her violet eyes went wide with fear. For a moment, Dany thought she might scream or run away or use her psychic powers to throw him through a wall, but she did none of those things. She just stared at him with tears streaming down her silver cheeks, looking like the loneliest person in the entire galaxy. And Dany knew in that moment that his quiet little life was about to change forever. Princess Lyra stared at Dany like he was some kind of strange creature she had never seen before. Her violet eyes were red from crying, and her silver skin was stained with tears that glittered like tiny diamonds. Dany did not move. He kept his hands visible at his sides and tried to look as harmless as possible. He had no idea what the proper way to address a Valoran princess was. Should he bow? Should he kneel? Should he look at the ground and wait for her to speak? First, he decided to do none of those things. "I am not going to hurt you," he said gently. "I work here, I fix things. I was just checking on a broken sensor. When I heard you crying," Lyra's mouth opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. She pressed herself harder against the wall as if she was trying to disappear into it. Danny slowly lowered himself to the ground until he was sitting across from her. He kept a respectful distance between them and rested his arms on his knees. "You do not have to talk if you do not want to," he said, "but you look like you are having a really bad day, and I have some water if you are thirsty." He reached into his tool belt and pulled out a small plastic bottle. It was nothing special, just regular water that he carried with him during long shifts. He held it out toward her and waited. Lyra looked at the bottle like it might be a trap. Her eyes moved from the water to Danny and LT Unc and GT's face and back again. Slowly, very slowly, she reached out and took it from his hand. Their fingers did not touch. Danny made sure of that. He did not want to scare her any more than she already was. Lyra opened the bottle and took a small sip, then another. Then she drank half of it in one long gulp, like she had not had anything to drink in days. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was so quiet that Danny barely heard it. "You are welcome," he said. "I am Danny, by the way, Danny Carter." Lyra wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I am Lyra." "I know," Danny said. "I read the briefing documents. You are the youngest princess of the Valorian Empire." Something dark passed across Lyra's face. "The weakest princess," she said bitterly. "That is what everyone calls me. The weakest, the smallest, the disappointment." Danny frowned. "That sounds like something mean people say because they don't have anything better to do." Lyra looked at him with surprise. "You do not think I am weak? I think I just met you 5 minutes ago," Danny said. "Honestly, I do not know you well enough to judge you, and even if I did, being small does not make someone weak. Some of the toughest people I know are small." Lyra was silent for a long moment. She looked down at the water bottle in her hands and turned it slowly, watching the liquid move inside. "On my world, strength is everything," she said quietly. "The brightest glow, the strongest mind, the tallest body. These are the things that matter. I have none of them. My brothers and sisters can move mountains with their thoughts. I can barely lift a chair. My father can read the minds of 1,000 beings at once. I cannot even sense the emotions of the person standing next to me." She looked up at Danny with eyes full of pain. "I am broken. Something went wrong when I was born. The healers do not know why. My family has spent my entire life trying to fix me, but nothing works. I am what I am, and what I am is not enough." Danny felt his heart ache for her. He had never experienced anything like what she described, but he understood the feeling of not being enough. He understood the pain of being compared to others and always coming up short. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. Lyra nodded slowly. "I am nobody special either," Daddy said. "I am not a diplomat or a scientist or a soldier. I fix pipes and change light bulbs for a living. Most people do not even know my name. They walk past me like I am invisible, and most of the time I like it that way." He paused and looked at her seriously. "But being invisible does not mean I am worthless. It just means that people are not looking hard enough to see me, and maybe the same is true For you, maybe your family is so busy, looking for one kind of strength that they cannot see the other kinds you have. Lyra tilted her head. What other kinds? Danny shrugged. I don't know yet. Like I said, I just met you, but you seem kind. You did not scream at me or order me to leave when you found me. Here, you said thank you when I gave you water. That might not seem like much, but it is more than most important people do. A tiny smile appeared on Lyra's face. It was the first time Danny had seen her smile, and it made her dim glow brighten just a little. You are strange, she said. Most humans I have met are nervous around Valorans. They bow and scrape and say whatever they think we want to hear. You just sit there and talk to me like I'm a normal person. You are a normal person, Danny said. You just happen to be a normal person who was born into a royal family on another planet. That does not change the fact that you have feelings and fears and bad days just like everyone else. Lyra laughed softly. It was a quiet sound, barely louder than a whisper, but it was real. I got lost, she admitted. During the ceremony, there were so many people and so many cameras, and I could not breathe. I ran away to find somewhere quiet, and then I could not find my way back. I have been wandering these halls for an hour. Danny nodded and stood up. He offered his hand to help her rise. I know this building better than anyone, he said. I can take you back to your family if you want. Lyra looked at his hand for a moment, then she took it and let him pull her to her feet. Her hand was cool and smooth, and her grip was gentle. I do not want to go back yet, she said quietly. Can we just walk for a little while? I am not ready to face them again. Danny smiled. Sure, I can show you the good parts of the building, the parts that the diplomats never see. For the next hour, Danny led Lyra through the hidden corners of the embassy. He showed her the rooftop garden where the maintenance staff grew tomatoes. He showed her the old observation deck that nobody used anymore because the elevator was broken. He showed her the supply closet where someone had painted a beautiful mural of Earth on the wall. Lyra asked questions about everything. She wanted to know how the machines worked, what the plants were called, why humans needed so much water to survive. Danny answered as best he could, and when he did not know the answer, he admitted it honestly. By the time her guards finally found them, Lyra was laughing at one of Danny and LT Unk and GT Y's terrible jokes about a plumber and an astronaut. The guards looked shocked to see their princess smiling and relaxed in the company of a human maintenance worker. Lyra turned to Danny before she left. Thank you, she said, for everything. Anytime, Danny replied. He watched her walk away with her guards, and he thought that would be the end of it, a strange encounter that he would remember fondly, but never repeat. The announcement came on the third day of the DeLorean visit, and it changed everything. Danny was eating lunch in the maintenance break room when he heard about it. His coworker, a friendly woman named Grace, burst through the door with wild eyes and told him to turn on the news immediately. The Emperor of the Valorian Empire stood at a podium in the main hall of the embassy. His silver skin glowed so brightly that the cameras had trouble focusing on him. Behind him stood his 7 children, arranged in order of age and power. Lyra was at the very end, almost out of frame, as a symbol of our commitment to the alliance between the Valorian Empire and Earth. The Emperor said in a deep voice that seemed to shake the walls. Each of my children will choose a human companion. These bonds will represent the friendship between our peoples. They will stand as proof that Valorans and humans can work together, live together, and trust each other. The room erupted into excited whispers. Danny stared at the screen with his sandwich frozen halfway to his mouth. The selection will take place tomorrow, the Emperor continued. We have invited the finest examples of humanity to present themselves as candidates. Military leaders, scientific geniuses, political figures, and cultural icons. My children will each choose the human they believe best represents the potential of your species. Grace grabbed Danny and LT Unk and GTY's arm. Can you believe this? They are going to pick humans to be their companions, like partners or something. Danny did not respond. He was watching Lyra on the screen. She looked terrified. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her and her eyes were fixed on the ground. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else in the universe. The next day, the main hall was transformed into something like a royal court from an old movie. Hundreds of chairs were arranged in neat rows, and a long red carpet stretched from the entrance to a raised platform where the Valoran royals sat on elaborate thrones. Danny was not supposed to be there. He had no business being anywhere near the ceremony, but he could not stop thinking about Lyra and the fear he had seen in her eyes, so he found an excuse to be in the area, carrying a toolbox and pretending to check on some wiring near the back wall. The human candidates were impressive. Danny recognized generals with chests full of medals, scientists who had won every award imaginable, billionaires who could buy small countries, and celebrities whose faces were known around the world. They all stood in a perfect line, dressed in their finest clothes, trying to look worthy of a Valoran's attention. The selection began with the oldest prince. He was massive, nearly 9 ft tall, with a glow that rivaled his father's. He walked slowly down the line of candidates, examining each one like a farmer inspecting livestock. Finally, he stopped in front of a 4-star general with gray hair and a stern face. This one, the prince said. He has the strength of a warrior. The general stepped forward and bowed deeply. Applause filled the hall. One by one, the other princes and princesses made their choices. A princess chose a famous brain surgeon. A prince chose a tech billionaire. Another princess chose an Olympic athlete with more gold medals than anyone in history. Each selection was met with cheers and approval from the crowd. Then it was Lyra's turn. Hall grew quiet. Everyone knew about the weakest princess. Everyone expected her to make a safe choice, to pick someone so impressive that it might make her look better by association. Or perhaps she would refuse to choose at all and embarrass herself further. Lyra stood from her throne. Her legs were shaking so badly that Danny could see it from across the room. She walked to the edge of the platform and looked out at the line of candidates. The seconds stretched into minutes. The crowd began to whisper. The Emperor's expression grew darker with each passing moment. Lyra's eyes moved away from the candidates. They scanned the edges of the room, searching for something. Danny pressed himself against the wall, trying to stay hidden behind a decorative pillar, but then her eyes found him. Danny felt his heart stop. She was looking directly at him, her violet eyes locked onto his, and something in her Expression changed, the fear did not disappear, but something else joined it. Something that looked almost like hope. Lyra stepped down from the platform. The crowd gasped as she walked past the line of candidates without even glancing at them. She moved through the rows of chairs, her small body trembling with every step. She was walking toward Danny. No, Danny thought, no, this is not happening, but it was happening. Lyra stopped right in front of him, close enough that he could see the tears forming in her eyes. She raised one shaking hand and pointed directly at his chest. That one, she said, her voice was barely a whisper, but in the shocked silence of the hall, everyone heard it. I want him. The room exploded into chaos. People shouted questions. Cameras flashed. The other Valoran royals rose from their thrones with expressions of shock and outrage. The Emperor's glow flared so bright that several people had to shield their eyes. He stood frozen against the wall, his toolbox hanging from one limp hand as the most powerful beings in the galaxy stared at him like he was an insect that had crawled into their palace. Who is that? Someone shouted. He is wearing a maintenance uniform, another voice cried. She chose a janitor. The whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Danny felt his face burning with embarrassment. He wanted to run. He wanted to hide. He wanted to wake up and discover this was all a terrible dream. But Lyra did not move. She stood in front of him with her hands still raised, and she did not back down. One of Lyra's older sisters stepped forward. She was tall and beautiful and cruel. Lyra, what is the meaning of this? You cannot choose this creature. He is nothing. He is less than nothing. He fixes toilets for a living. I know what he does, Lyra said. Her voice shook, but she did not lower her hand. I know who he is, and I choose him. Father will never allow this, the sister hissed. You are making a fool of yourself again. Lyra finally turned to face her sister. For a moment Danny saw something flash in her violet eyes. It was not strength, not the way Valorans understood strength. It was something else, something stubborn and desperate and brave. Father said we could choose any human we wanted, Lyra said quietly. He did not say they had to be important. He did not say they had to be powerful. He said we could choose, and I have chosen. She turned back to Danny and looked up at him. The tears were falling freely down her silver cheeks now, but she was smiling. Will you accept? She asked him. You do not have to, I know. This is strange and scary, and you probably think I am crazy, but you were kind to me when no one else was. You treated me like a person when everyone else treats me like a problem. I do not want a general or a scientist or a billionaire. I want someone who makes me feel like I am enough. Danny stared at her. His mind was blank. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst out of his chest. He thought about his quiet life, his empty apartment, his invisible existence. He thought about all the years he had spent hiding in the background, afraid to be seen, afraid to matter. And then he thought about Lyra, crying alone in a hallway, waiting for someone to notice she was hurting. He dropped his toolbox and took her hand. Yeah, he said softly, I accept. Chaos around them continued, but Danny did not hear it anymore. All he could see was Lyra's smile growing brighter, and all he could feel was her cool fingers wrapped around his own. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The days following the selection were the most difficult of Danny and LT, Unk and GT wise life. The Emperor was furious. He demanded that Lyra withdraw her choice and select a proper candidate. When she refused, he threatened to disown her entirely. The other Valoran royals mocked her openly, calling her selection the final proof of her weakness and stupidity. The human diplomats were confused and embarrassed. They had prepared their finest citizens for this honor, and the youngest princess had chosen a maintenance worker. Instead, news channels around the world ran the story for days. Dai's face was everywhere, and the coverage was not kind, but none of that mattered as much as what happened next. Galactic law required that any companion bond between species must be validated through a series of trials. These trials were designed to prove that the chosen individual was worthy of the honor. They tested strength, intelligence, and courage. The trials had been created thousands of years ago, when the galaxy was young and violent. They were meant for warriors and scholars, not for ordinary people who fixed pipes for a living. Everyone expected Dany to fail spectacularly. Dany expected it too. On the morning of the first trial, he stood in a massive arena beneath the embassy. The room was filled with Valoran observers, including the Emperor and his children. Lyra sat in a special section reserved for sponsors, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. A tall Valoran in medical robes approached Dany. His name was Counselor Vaughn, and he was the official examiner for the trials. Human, Vaughn said coldly, you will now undergo a series of tests designed to evaluate your physical and mental capabilities. The standards have been adjusted for your species, but I warn you that the challenges ahead are still quite demanding. Do you understand? Dany nodded. His mouth was too dry to speak. The first test was endurance. Dany was placed on a machine that measured his cardiovascular performance. While he ran on an endless track, the speed increased gradually, and the air became thinner to simulate high altitude conditions. Dany ran. He ran until his legs burned and his lungs screamed for air. He ran until sweat poured down his face and his vision started to blur. Around the edges, he thought about all the times he had climbed through maintenance shafts in the heat of summer. He thought about all the overtime shifts he had worked without rest. He thought about the stubborn determination that had gotten him through every hard day of his life. When the machine finally stopped, Dany collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. He was sure he had failed. But then he looked up and saw the expressions on the Valoran faces. They were not laughing. They were staring at him with something that looked almost like fear. Counselor Vaughn checked his instruments 3 times before speaking. This cannot be correct, he muttered. A human sustained peak performance for nearly 40 minutes. Our projections estimated 12 minutes at most. Dany blinked. Is that good? Vor did not answer. He simply made notes on his tablet and moved to the next test. The second test was pain tolerance. Dany was connected to a device had sent electrical pulses through his nervous system. The pulses started mild and grew stronger until the subject indicated they could not continue. Dany gritted his teeth and held on. He thought about the time he had broken his arm as a child and walked 2 miles home because there was no one to help him. He thought about the kidney stone he had passed 3 years ago while still finishing a 12-hour shift. He thought about all the injuries and illnesses he had pushed through because that was what humans The device reached its maximum setting. Danny was still conscious and coherent. Counselor Vaughn's silver skin had gone pale. Impossible, he whispered. The maximum setting is designed to incapacitate Valoran soldiers. How are you still speaking? Danny shrugged. Weakly, it hurts a lot, he admitted. But I have felt worse. The third test was disease resistance, a small sample of Danny and LT Unk and GT Y's blood was exposed to various pathogens that were common across the galaxy. The examiners watched through microscopes as Danny and LT Unk and GT Y's immune system responded. The results caused an uproar in the observation chamber. Dye's white blood cells attacked the foreign invaders with a ferocity that the Valorans had never seen. Diseases that would have killed members of most species were destroyed. Within minutes, his body temperature rose slightly, indicating a fever response that cooked the pathogens alive. From the inside, his immune system is treating our test samples like a declaration of war, one of the medical observers said in disbelief. It is not just fighting the pathogens, it is hunting them down and destroying them completely. The fourth test was the one Danny had feared the most. It was a combat simulation. He was placed in a room with holographic enemies programmed to attack him from all sides. He was given no weapons and no armor. He was simply told to survive for as long as possible. Danny had never been in a real fight in his life. He was not a soldier or a martial artist. He was just a regular guy who preferred to avoid conflict whenever possible. But when the first holographic enemy lunged at him, something changed. His heart rate spiked, adrenaline flooded his system, his vision narrowed to focus only on the threat in front of him. His muscles tensed, ready to fight or flee. His body did not care that the enemies were not real. It only knew that danger was present, and it responded accordingly. Danny fought like a man possessed. He dodged attacks he should not have been able to see coming. He struck back with strength he did not know he had. When one enemy grabbed him from behind, he twisted free with a desperate surge of energy that sent them both crashing to the ground. By the time the simulation ended, Danny had survived for over an hour. He stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, his fists still raised and his eyes wild with the remnants of adrenaline. The observation chamber was completely silent. Counselor Vaughn finally spoke, and his voice was filled with something that sounded almost like respect. We have made a serious error in our evaluation of your species, he said. Slowly, we classified humans as physically weak based on your size and the youth of your civilization. We did not account for the environment that created you. He pulled up a holographic display of Earth. Danny saw the familiar blue and green sphere rotating slowly in the air. Your planet has gravity nearly 3 times stronger than Valoria. Vaughn continued, your atmosphere is filled with substances that would poison most species. Your world experiences extreme temperature variations, violent weather patterns, and regular natural disasters. The life forms on your planet are constantly trying to kill each other, and the diseases are among the most aggressive in the known galaxy. He turned to look at Danny with new eyes. You are not weak human, you are a survivor of one of the most hostile environments in the galaxy. Your species did not evolve in safety and comfort. Like most of us, you evolved in a war. zone. Your bodies are designed to endure pain, resist disease, and fight until there is nothing left. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne, his expression unreadable. Vaughn bowed his head. Your Majesty, the human scores higher than any of the prestigious candidates selected by your other children. He is, by our measurements, the most impressive physical specimen among all the chosen companions. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Dany looked up at Lyra. She was crying again, but this time she was smiling too. Her dim glow seemed just a little bit brighter than before. He gave her a tired thumbs up. For the first time in her life, Princess Lyra had made a choice that no one could criticize. And for the first time in his life, Dany Carter understood that being ordinary did not mean being worthless. Humanity was not a young and primitive species waiting to be guided by their betters. Humanity was a species of survivors forged in the fires of a deadly world, and they were just getting started. The formal bonding ceremony took place 1 week after the trials ended. It was held in the grand ballroom of the embassy with representatives from dozens of alien species in attendance. The event was broadcast across the galaxy, watched by billions of beings who wanted to see the strange human who had captured the attention of the universe. Dany stood at the front of the room in a simple black suit. He had refused the elaborate ceremonial robes that the Valorans had offered him. He was not royalty, and he did not want to pretend to be something he was not. Lyra walked toward him down a long aisle lined with flowers from 100 different worlds. She wore a gown of pale silver that matched her skin, and her hair was arranged in an intricate pattern that had taken her attendants hours to complete. She looked beautiful and terrified in equal measure, but when her eyes met Dany and LT Unk and GT Wise, the fear melted away. She smiled, and her dim glow flickered with warmth. The Emperor himself performed the ceremony. His voice was stiff and formal, and he did not look at Dany once during the entire proceeding, but he spoke the words that bound them together as companions under Valoran law, and that was what mattered. When the ceremony ended, the crowd applauded politely. The other Valoran royals clapped with expressions of barely concealed disgust, but Dany did not care about any of them. He only cared about the small princess standing beside him, holding his hand like she never wanted to let go. The reception that followed was overwhelming. Dignitaries and nobles approached Dany, constantly asking questions about his species, his planet, his life. Most of them seemed more curious than hostile. Now the results of his trials had spread throughout the galaxy, and the word Deathworlder was on everyone's lips. Dany answered their questions as honestly as he could, but he kept most of his attention on Lyra. She stayed close to his side all evening, and he noticed that she stood a little taller than she had before. The mocking whispers of her siblings still reached her ears, but she no longer flinched. When she heard them, late in the evening, Dany led Lyra away from the crowd and onto a balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. It was one of the most beautiful sights Dany had ever seen. I used to watch sunsets alone, he said quietly from the rooftop of my apartment building. It was the one time of day when everything felt peaceful. Lyra leaned against the railing beside him. We do not have sunsets like this on Valoria. Our sun is white and cold, and It sets so quickly you barely notice it happening. Then I am glad I can share this one with you. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the colors shift and change. Across the sky, Danny could hear the distant sounds of the reception behind them, but it felt very far away. My family still thinks I made a mistake, Lyra said finally. They think I chose you to embarrass them, or because I was too foolish to recognize a proper candidate. Danny turned to look at her. What do you think? Lyra met his eyes. Her violet gaze was steady and clear. I think I made the only choice that made sense. You were the first person in my entire life who treated me like I was worth something. You did not bow to me because of my title. You did not pity me because of my weakness. You just gave me water and told me that being small did not make me worthless. She reached out and took his hand. Everyone else saw a maintenance worker and assumed you were beneath them. I saw a kind man who stopped to help a crying stranger, and I knew that was more valuable than all the medals and awards in the universe. Danny felt his throat tighten with emotion. I am still just a regular guy. Lyra, I do not know anything about politics or diplomacy or how to act around royalty. I am probably going to embarrass you 1,000 times before this is over. Lyra laughed softly. Good. I've been embarrassing my family my whole life. At least now I will have company. They both laughed, and the sound carried out over the city like music. The weeks that followed were filled with challenges and adjustments. Danny had to learn the customs and protocols of Valoran society. Lyra had to learn how to navigate her new role as the princess who had chosen a Death Worlder. Together they faced criticism, skepticism, and constant scrutiny from every direction, but they also found joy in unexpected places. Danny taught Lyra about Earth's culture, its history, its art and music and food. He showed her old movies that made her laugh and sad songs that made her cry. He introduced her to pizza and ice cream and the simple pleasure of walking through a park on a sunny afternoon. Lyra taught Danny about the wonders of the galaxy. She showed him holographic star maps and told him stories about distant civilizations. She explained the principles of Valoran technology and demonstrated her limited psychic abilities with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. They learned from each other. They grew together, and slowly, almost without noticing, they fell in love. The galaxy was changing too. News of Danny and LT Unk and GTY's trial results had spread far and wide, and humanity was no longer seen as a minor species on the edge of civilized space. Other civilizations began to study Earth more closely, and what they found amazed and frightened them in equal measure. Humans were survivors. They were adapters. They were relentless problem solvers who refused to give up. Even when all hope seemed lost, they had crawled out of the mud on a planet that tried to kill them every single day, and they had built civilizations and reached for the stars anyway. The term Deathworlder became a badge of honor. Human ambassadors found themselves treated with new respect. Human scientists were invited to collaborate on galactic research projects. Human soldiers were recruited as elite warriors for interstellar peacekeeping forces, and at the center of it all, a quiet maintenance worker and a shy alien princess showed the universe what true strength really looked like. It was not about size or power or psychic abilities. It was about kindness. It was About courage, it was about seeing the value in others when the rest of the world was too blind to look. On the anniversary of their bonding ceremony, Danny and Lyra returned to the same balcony where they had watched their first sunset together. The sky was painted in familiar colors, and the city sparkled below them like a sea of stars. "My family has finally stopped complaining about my choice," Lyra said, with a small smile. "My father even said he was proud of me yesterday. I think that might be the first time he has ever said those words." Danny put his arm around her shoulders. "How does it feel?" Lyra leaned into him, and her glow, still dim compared to her siblings, burned warm and steady. "It feels like I finally found where I belong." Danny pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Same here." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the world in gold. Behind them, the sounds of the embassy continued as diplomats and aliens went about their important business, but none of that mattered to them. What mattered was this moment, this connection, this unlikely bond between two people who had both spent their lives feeling invisible and worthless. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders. There were empires to build and mysteries to solve and adventures waiting around every corner. But right now, in this quiet moment, all that Danny and Lyra needed was each other. The weakest princess had pointed at the most ordinary human and said she wanted him. And it turned out that was exactly what the universe needed. Sometimes the greatest strength is not found in the loudest voice or the brightest glow. Sometimes it is found in the quiet ones who see what everyone else misses. And sometimes the best stories begin when someone simply asks, "Hey, are you okay?" Danny smiled and held Lyra close. As the last light of the sun faded into night, their story was just beginning, and he could not wait to see what came.